like Mayas, Aztecs, and Aztec, which was located in Central America, okay, and Incas, which was located in South America. But three civilization has very great influence in earlier time of America. And I will talk about very little bit about Maya's civilization, their society, their polity, their economy, their activities of the people, their habitation of the peoples, everything. Okay, so we will first discuss the Mayas, the earliest known great civilization of the region. Mayan settlements, their polity, their society, we analyze details today. Basic thing is coming to our mind, why and how this mighty civilization collapsed, and also we discussed the later part. After finish this, all these things, the Maya civilization flourished between 500 BC and 1000 AD, classical period, just like 300 to 900 AD. The region where the civilization nestled includes modern Guatemala and Belize, southern Mexico, western parts of the Honduras, and El Salvador. These are the places basically the capturing this Maya civilization. If we will talk about the settlement and architecture, then the cities and ceremonial centers we found basically we found almost in all Maya settlement, and the number of remains of huge structure and staging. The layout of the cities was somewhat as follows: the central ceremonial court surrounded by a large plaza where markets were held, then where arrayed the houses of chiefs, priests, and other functionaries. There are other structures also, from small plazas to enormous reservoirs, broad causeways, ball courts, smaller mountains. In the highland Maya settlements, there were pits, which is called wells, for procuring usable water. So in this way, the use of lime mortar was the distinguished characteristic of the Maya architecture. Lime mortar. Okay. In the Coral arc, the stone are so placed that each project projects a little beyond the one below it. This city represents the general character of Maya civilization. Okay, the principal temple pyramid, although only 27 feet high, but there is evidence of a high priest buried in the plaza. The floor level was raised to contain his tomb and a similar temple. Presumably, above the grave was shaded. Slowly, with the passage of years and evolution of techniques, the temple developed into a complex of building. We are discussing about architecture of Maya civilization, so that we have to discuss some architecture of some few temples, some buildings, some palace. Okay, Attical around the first century AD, three large platforms and two smaller ones were built on the North Acropolis. Monumental buildings were also constructed during the late formative phase at El Mirador and Lamanai, Culo, and Altar Sacrificio in Patton, etc. Okay. Besides the monumental structure that the Mayas built, they had simple native houses for the peasants and other also plebeians called the Enena. Okay. It was the type of house where the material used was wood for the wall and palm leaf for thatch. The Mayas had a system of raised causeway or a road system called scave. These used to connect ancient cities of the Maya. Okay, these roadways or causeway were ceremonial, okay, economic and administrative functions. Pilgrims who had a right asylum have walked along the causeways from the hinterland. The Maya also used the sea routes. Okay, they have also used the sea routes. If we will talk about the polity and of course the society, then we have some information from the historians. Like The Maya city states were the real man or the Halach unique. This office was neither elective nor selective. Neither elective nor selective. It was hereditary. The office descended from father to son. If the Lord died, then it was the eldest son who succeeded him. So the office dependable on the father. After the death of father, then it was dependable to the son. Okay. The Halas unique were both the spiritual and temporal authority of their city state. So I will talk about the official who were known as the Ahu, the more commonly Batabab. Okay, a Batabab was responsible for the governments of his own resident city. He was responsible for the governments for his own resident city, and he settled disputes, usually contract violations, and also the land disputes. Batabab. Okay, the commoners used to carry the Batabab in a litter wherever he used to go. The commoners or the peasants used to serve the men of upper class in many ways. Land and salt pits were communally owned. Individual community members were assigned plots of land to cultivate and grow food. There was Cha, the rain god, the name of the rain god, who had to propitiate before the agricultural operations. The basic thing of the Maya civilization of the peasants. The Maya peasants used to store food grains for rainy days, especially. The lower section of the Maya society was also made to pay the tax or tribute. Maize was the first tax. Part of the farmer's surplus was turned over to the state. Besides working in the fields in Maya civilization, the peasants were doing some different works, and other peoples, common peoples, were also doing some different works like weaving. Weaving was one of the main occupation of this civilization. Weaving. Okay. Both men and women were engaged in this, and they used to carve and make baskets, rope, mat, pots, etc. Exchange of goods and trade with other people was a regular activity through these people. So one question is coming here: the why and how did the Maya civilization collapse? So every beginning has an end. So every civilization has ended also. So here the Maya civilization has also ended. How it was possible, and why and how this Maya civilizations collapse? We have some points. Basically, around the 9th century AD, the Maya construction building seems to have stopped. The construction of building had stopped. Okay, and marking the beginning of the collapse of the civilization. Some scholars have suggested and also argued here that it was an epidemic such as malaria or yellow fever. Yellow fever. So it might have been the social consequences of some calamity such as drought or earthquake. Due to these reasons, maybe this civilization has collapsed. Okay, that the reason was an agricultural collapse, or of course the peasant uprising, and the last one is very important, that is the invasion by the Mexicans. So these are the main points. We can say this civilization has collapsed. There was a demographic change during the late classic phase. Demographic changes due to the growth of population. Consequently, there was a pressure on the limited agricultural resource of the region. There is some archaeological evidence also. We can also go through the archaeological evidence. That is very important source of the late time in the form of human skeletons of commoners mostly. The skeletons attest stone growth, scurvy, anemia, and periodical disease, which stone implies food shortage. Maybe due to the reasons for the collapse of this Maya civilization. Peasants' rebellions being one of the cause for the decline of the civilization. Peasant rebellions. The decline and demise of the Maya civilization was no doubt a complex process. It involved it involved the competition between different settlements over the control of trade routes of the west and war for the same. Sometimes the competitors has started for the trade, so that this was also one reason for this collapsed. And the Incas, like Maya's, Inca civilization has also taken a very good place in Latin America. The Inca civilization territorially spread over parts of modern Ecuador, Peru, Bolivia, Chile, Argentina. Especially these places is taken for Inca. Okay, and here I will tell you the substantial part of their history. They were under a single Inca state called Tawantishu between 12th and 16th century AD. If we will talk about the organization of polity of this civilization, then consolidation of the Inca power occurred between 13th to 15th century AD. The Incas united a vast territory with an extensive network of paved roads, and basically, of course, happened during the 15th century when Kouchos changed from being the nucleus of the local polity. It was not only the administrative headquarters of the Inca, but also the ceremonial center, where the 100 pieces of fine cloth were sacrificed daily and scores of priests fasted while watching the movements of the sun from their palace observatories. So these are the main things of polity, basically the organization of polity. The European conquistadors had found that there were several ethnic groups spread all over the place. Of course, somewhere the royal functionaries were placed along the roads at administrative centers and used to inspect and oversee the subject provincial lords and their territories. The local lords and their communities provided labor services as well as military services to the Incas according to the principle of meet. So basically, the economic life of this civilization is not so bad. If we will discuss about economic life, then the agricultural practice was there. It was very common. Okay, which were the maize, the specific crop, and the parts of the Inca territories. They fed their populace using advanced agriculture techniques. They have used very advanced agricultural techniques, including terrace cultivation, crop rotation, and also irrigation. The irrigation facilities was there. Basically, through these facilities, they have achieved a lot for their trade, and of course, their economic life was very good. So, the salt, the fish, the edible, the large were available at the coastal area. These settlements basically probably led to the craft specialization. Besides being ecological specific, the settlement for some historical reason became artisan specific. If we will talk about the civilization, about religion, then it has also some important points. Local religious beliefs were respected through the people of the acquired territory, were asked to worship the Inca lords of nature as the sun. They were believed on the sun, so and the mother earth. Okay, the deity of the local community was taken to Cusco, where it was placed either in the temple or on the of the sun or in a special shrine, and it was looked after by a priestly staff restricted from the province. So human sacrifice were part of the rituals performed by the Incas. They developed a calendar and decimal number system. So here we have discussed little bit important things of these two civilizations, Mayas and Incas. They are all aspects of economic life, social life, and of course the religioustic belief. If you will go through the Aztec civilization, it was the last part of the American civilization, the early American civilization, that is Aztec. It flourished between the 12th and 15th century AD. The present region of Mexico was the area where this civilization was flourished. It was a vast empire spread in around an area of 2 lakh square kilometers. The empire was divided into a number of provinces, just like 38. Each of the provinces was ruled by a governor who ruled over the tribes in the region. It was the last indigenous civilization before the Spanish colonized Mexico. If we will talk about the settlement and polity, then we have some important points. Here the Aztec supplanted the Toltecs around 1100 AD and established settlements which grew into a sophisticated polity in the Americans. So these tribes used to pay taxes to the Aztecs and follow their own forms of governments and worship their own deity. The Aztec established the twins towns of Tenochtitlan and Tlatelolco on the western shore of the lake Texcoco in the early 14th century AD. Drawing on the surpluses of the conquered tribes, Aztecs built their capital Tenochtitlan into a wonderful city. If we will talk about the economic activities, then we have some important accounts of this civilization. Basically, the Aztecs used cocoa beans, cotton, copper plates, small flooded mantles, and wheels filled with gold dust and standard units of value or money currency in their commercial dealings. But the chief means of exchange was either barter or units of hours of work. If we will talk about the religious belief, the life of religious of this civilization, basically the main three causeways was the temple enclosure surrounded by an 8-foot wall which was surmounted by snakes of carved stones. There were more than 30 temples in the enclosure and included ones dedicated to Huitzilopochtli, the chief deity of the Aztec, and also to the chief deity of the Toltecs and other deities of the conquered tribes. So not only the deities of the conquered people were admitted to the Aztec, but also the conquered people were allowed to retain their political systems and social practices without any interference or imposition. So in this way, these three civilizations from Latin America we have already finished, and we discussed very little bit because 2 more units we have to finish right now, and you will study very hard through these books, through these materials in your home. So now we will go through the second unit, the next unit of this block, that is Africa. It has many aspects to discuss, basically its chronology. Okay, basically it's pharaonic Egypt, pyramids, kingship, organization of government and society. Of course, the West Africa, after North, then South Africa, everything. Basically, the knowledge about Africa was limited to some areas of North Africa, which came in contact with the Asia and Europe from ancient times. However, very little was known about the vast areas of Africa called Sub-Saharan Africa. In the 15th century, Europeans made inroads in Africa, but it was with a limited purpose of indulging in self-trade. So it is very difficult to discuss to this unit the history, such a vast continent with different language, culture, social activities, and of course the economical life. So first we will discuss about the North African situation. In this section, we will focus the polity. Basically, we will also provide a brief account of society and also the religion. If we will go through the North Africa, Then the Nile Valley civilization has been a fascination for not only the archaeologists and historians but also for the common tourist. So it has often been said that Egypt was more of an Arabic civilization than an African one. If we will talk about chronology, then we have lots of things, but still we have to take very little bit, few important things. The ancient civilization of the Nile Valley dates back to prior to 3000 BC. Historians have, for convenience, classified the history of the region in the following chronological fashion. First is the pre-dynastic settlement, then the pharaonic Egypt divided into old, middle and new kingdoms, and the spanning 31 dynasties till 332 BC. Pharaonic Egypt, the pharaohs Egypt has also been chronologically mapped as follows. The first interval known as the Old Kingdom was founded by Djoser, the third dynasty of this civilization, of this dynasty of this empire. So by 2050 BC, in the 11th dynasty, against again centralized rule was established and continued till 786 BC. This rule is known as the Middle Kingdom and had its capital at Thebes in Upper Egypt. The rulers of the Upper Egypt revolted against the Hyksos and finally in the year 1560 BC. If we will talk about the pyramids and Egyptian religion, then the mention of Egypt commonly evokes the image of the pyramid and the sphinx. Djoser, the second king of the third dynasty, was the first one who is given credit for building the earliest pyramid. The other well-known pyramids are found at Giza, which were built by Pharaoh Khufu, Khafre. The pyramids were built to house the mummy of the dead ruler. The burial chamber of the ruler was surrounded by other burials as well as a complex of temples built to worship gods and the dead rulers. These burials include the rulers, servants, wives, sometimes children too. Within the tombs were placed furnitures, jewelry, other crafted objects, some personal belonging also. The Egyptians believed in the continuity of life after death. They believed their life after death. So cults were developed after the dead kings and they were worshipped along with other gods in temple also. Before the political unification in 2009-25 BC, there were various local cults and guardian deities. Basically, the sun god Ra had universal acceptance because of his universal presence. Temple was a place where people used to assemble and worship. It was thus the symbol of their locality and community. At times, local temples also served as national symbols, such as the Temple of Ra at Heliopolis during the Old Kingdom and the Temple of Neth at Suez during the 26th dynasties. Temples also, with the passage of time, had assumed major economic and political roles. Towards the end of the new kingdoms, the temple of Ammon Ra at Karnak was the chief political authority in the entire Upper Egypt. The temple or the priest, to be more precise, had not only religious obligations but administrative responsibilities also, such as looking after the arable lands, flocks, mines, and granaries, etc. Of course, the river transport, dispensing justice, and so on. The pharaohs were ruling as the agents of God or sons of God on earth and were known as pharaohs. Basically, if you will talk about kingship, then the Egyptians believed that The kingship was a divine office. Disputes of succession of kingship also could not be ruled out, and the power and authority of the divine office of the pharaohs were at times contested by the powerful provincial governors and officers. The fall of the old dynasty was caused largely by the great chief or priest of the southern provinces. Similarly, the power of the heaven priest and the general of the southern military proved to be the bane of the new kingdom. So, the social cost of such royal crisis and how did the royal crisis affect the common people of the Egypt is not known. So the king was not only an agent of the god to hurt and the Egyptians, he was also the chief arbiter of justice and keeper of the mart or order. If we will talk about the organization, government and society, then basically we will go through the administration. The administration was organized very efficiently, very systematically. The entire kingdom was divided into nomes, and there was a hierarchy of officials to look after the nomes who were mostly from the royal families. The main resource of work and labor were the people from lower strata. The wheel was not used by them. It was not used by them, wheel. Therefore, they used to drag heavy loads for building and other purposes. So both high floored and low floored were harnessed for agriculture. Because of the fertility of the flood plains, one crop in a year was sufficient to leave plenty of surpluses to be used in the building of gigantic structure as well as the running of the institutions such as the temples and kingship and scribes. After the agricultural operations, labor was available for also other activities. Basically, the absence of wheel was no deterrent to transport system because the Egyptians had developed a network of waterways and they also built boats of varying sizes and tonnage. Agricultural products and food grains were transported to granaries and markets from the fields mainly through this transport network. So they have already achieved a lot basically for the organization of government and basically through the society, their trade, their economy system was very good. So if you will go through the West Africa after North Africa, then it was not less than, because according to available archaeological evidence, we can say the West Africa as other regions of Africa was dotted with human settlements of Stone Age and Iron Age also. From 11th century onwards, we have along with archaeological evidence the writings of Arab geographers and scholars about West Africa, and it is about this period, that is from the 11th to 16th century AD. West Africa, generally speaking, consists of the area between the western borders of modern Mauritania and the eastern border of modern Nigeria. If we will talk about its background, then before the Arab influence came, there were a few monarchical states in this region, because these kingdoms may appear small in terms of geographical areas as compared to later ones. Yet, these were developed state systems with established towns and cities. They also had extensive network of markets and trade centers which were supported by developed agricultural hinterland. There is also archaeological evidence of evolution of cattle herding and settled agricultural economy among the mixed population. So they also had plenty of iron which they had been working. In some instances we have seen since 500 BC in return of iron they collected copper, other metals and Arab horses. They also could offer slaves. If we will talk about the some major monarchies of West Africa, then Ghana was powerful kingdom. Ghana, it was very powerful kingdom. According to archaeologists, the description of its capital by the Probodan geographer Abu Dahed al-Bakr may be that of Kumbi Saleh on southern Mauritania. Kumbi Saleh was divided into two distinct parts. The one part was built in local African style with round mud houses and walled. One is Palace of the King. The other part of the city had houses built stone and a few mosques. So during the 10th century, the monarchs of Ghana extended their domination over the Sanhaza. The Sanhaza tribes were partially Islamized people like the Berbers. Thus, basically they are Berbers. Thus soon become part of the militant and Puritanical Islamic movement known as Almoravid. But by the beginning of the 13th century AD, the depredations of the Almoravids, their intestines fight led to the undermining of the agricultural economy and power of Ghana. By the 16th centuries, they extended their influence of her name in the east and also up to the salt mines. If we will talk about society, their economy, and of course their polity, then the information about the society, basically their economy during the Ghana, the Mali and the Songhai regimes, basically in West Africa, it's quite sketchy because the Ghana kingdom had its agricultural production, which was not only sufficient to feed the entire kingdom, but also helped in the consolidation of the kingdom. Yet the Ghana kingdom derived its economic power by imposing tax on the Saran trade. The king was divine figure under the Ghanas. The different ethnic groups and clans were following their customs. Basically, the traditional village chiefs called Dugutigi were the first and the smallest administrative unit of the empire. Above this were the clan units with the chiefs. Some of the clans together constituted the province under a provincial governor called the Pharaoh. The commoners were basically the producers for the empire. They were engaged in agriculture, animal rearing, fishing, mining, and workers, craftsmen for the non-agriculture productions. If we will talk about town, basically the towns were also quite populated and housed not only nobles, aristocrats who took care of government, army, and priesthood, but craftsmen also. Various smiths were living in towns which were chiefly trade centers. The traders were mostly foreigners and they gave a composition character to the towns. The chief town during the Songhe, Timbuktu, Gao, June, etc. The aristocracy had a luxurious life which is attested by their big houses and the garments they have also used. The presence of numerous courtesans is indicative of the luxurious lifestyle of the aristocrats and the moral laxity prevalent in the upper of the society. Slaves captured during war and by other means were labor reserved for the all West African regimes. If we will talk about South Africa, then South Africa is a modern nation state, basically which is of recent origin of comparison to the long history of human civilization. Mapping the communities, first we will see the mapping. There are communities also We have few evidences to suggest that human settlement existed in the southern region even before the beginning of Christian era. The evidences of their existence suggest that they were largely hunter gatherers, and meaning they lived by hunting wild animals, fishing, gathering fruits and edible plants also. These communities were called Bushmen by the European colonizers of Africa
They can be engaged.
when they came in this region in the 17th century AD. Thereafter probably arrived the mixed farmer of part pastoralist and part settled farmers. These mixed farmers used iron for making digging sticks, made pottery also, were settled in villages for reasonably long period of time. These were called the Kafirs by the Europeans. The communities were differentiated ethno-linguistically also. The Khoikhoi were, it has been said, pastoralists, and the San were hunter-gatherers. However, it seems that when some pastoralists lost their herds, either due to some cattle epidemic or some rival tribe in a conflict, they again took to hunting and gathering. Basically, if you will talk about South African economy, then the mixed farming was most productive economy. It was more productive than both the pastoralists and hunter gatherers. The mixed farming practices included not only agriculture and metallurgy, but also a degree of pastoralism, cattle rearing, as well as some amount of hunting and also gathering. The mixed farmers, therefore, had a stable and richer supply of food than the hunters on the pastoralists. They used to smelt it and reheating and hammering shape it as spearheads, hatches, and hoes. It was major trade item also that time. Cattle overwhelmingly formed the mainstay of the economy of the southern Bantu societies. Cows had entered the idiom and proverbs and songs common in the South Bantu societies. Gradually, over centuries, agro-pastoralism came to be practiced by the Bantu communities in the entire eastern half of South Africa and northern Namibia. A very sharp division of labor between the sexes characterized the agro-pastoralist society. The men were responsible for the livestock. Herding was the main preoccupations. The boys also used to tend the cattle at the early age of 10 years or so. If you will go through the another thing, the eastern Transvaal region's copper and iron were found abundantly here and were possessed by the local men who had been following it for hundreds of years. Basically, in 1635, it was reported of some South African community that the women do all the work such as painting, tilling the earth with a stick. A large number of Europeans have mentioned that women were overburdened with manual chores. Clearing Clearing of the land had to be done periodically as they were practicing Sweden agriculture. That is, they cultivated a field for some years, and then allowed it to lie fallow for some time and shifted to some other field. Maize was introduced into South Africa during the 18th century AD. After the men cleared the field, it was the task of women to take over. Women did the hoeing, planting, weeding, and harvesting. Women also had to look after the young and the household chores. Basically, staple food and cleaning of utensils, fetching water and firewood wherever necessary it was. If we will talk about the bride wealth, then the bride wealth was a unique institution in the South African Bantu speaking society. A woman moved from her parental house to that of her in laws after marriage, but she was supposed to shoulder the responsibility of agricultural production, food preparation, upkeep of the house, and giving birth and, and rearing of children. Possession of more cattle enhanced the ability to pay bride wealth and procure more than one wives, which was the case with clan chiefs and other privileged elites. Bride's parents were willing to give their daughters to men substance or the chiefs so that they may get good bride wealth. If we will talk about the organization of government, then the people south of Limpo had distinct political institutions and identities. Most of the communities had kings or chiefs. They had all the characteristics of kingdoms. The size of these kingdoms or principalities, as historians Elizabeth Rees would prefer to call them, varied. So the chief of the clans, communities, states were supposed to bring in good rain, which would ensure good harvest. In case of a drought or authority of the chief was challenged, and his people did desert him along with their cattle. So the cattle resources could help establish new chieftains. Some chief, some chieftains attracted group of followers and had combined totem as the rolo. So the last part of this blog is nomadic empires. The last unit of this blog is nomadic empires. So we have already finished this African, all the Western Africans culture, basically the North Africa, Western Africa, and of course the South Africa. They're all economy, society, they're mapping their communities and their polity, their background, their major monarchies, everything. Then if you will go to the last unit, the nomadic empires, it has few important points, few aspects here to discuss, because this unit will discuss different perspective, because we will study as the societies which establish nomadic empires with well-defined polity, their society, their economy, and their interaction with sedentary civilization down to the Middle Ages. The interaction of nomadic and semi-nomadic societies with sedentary civilization is a theme which has had frequent debates in history. Here we will be analyzing the nature of the nomadic empires in Central Asia as well as Europe. Basically, to understand the concept clearly, this unit is divided into 5 sections. In the first section, we will be dealing with the concepts such as nomadism, empire, nomadic empires. In the second section, we will look at the setting in which this great nomadic imperium unfolds in the historical context. Basically, nomads there and their empires. Some, of course, there are some issues. There is difference between nomadism and pastoral nomadism. Pastoral nomadism is very rural nomadism. The former refers to movement of people who are not directly engaged in herd rearing and herd tending, while the latter is engaged in it. In the Indian context, many such communities can be found today who are nomadic but not pastoral. In this section, we will be dealing also with communities, people, groups who were pastoral nomadics and played a major role in the creation of the empires on the Eurasian steppes. Pastoral nomadism has been variously understood. There is historians like A.M. Khanjonov defines it as a food extracting economy where the entire community is dependent on its herds for the supply of food. Basically, this is a form of economic production that appears to have developed out of sedentary animal husbandry among groups that practiced both agriculture and stock breeding. Most pastoral nomadic societies of Eurasia continue to practice some form, at least vestigial agriculture, and distinct forms of social and political organization evolved or were brought into being a response to the demands of this type of economic activity and the nature of the interaction of the nomads with their sedentary neighbors. The nomadism should be seen as a vibrant, rational response to the ecological, political, and also social context that has economic dimension to it. It is the economic dimension that, among other things, leads to massive steppe empires in the early and middle periods of history of the steppe. So empires have been essentially understood as different than the kingdoms. They are often distinguished from kingdoms for their structural sophistication because of their large landmass empires needed to integrate both the various local cultures within the empire and the various key regions. So, as argued by Romila Thapar, empires have been understood as having three essential components. Three essential components. He argued three essential components. At the core of the empire is the metropolitan state, reigned around by the core regions, which are kingdoms in themselves. Then there are peripheries, whose boundaries that separate the course of lie in between the course. The metropolitan state exerts to establish control and ensure a flow of resources to it from the course and the peripheries. Like the Mauryan Empire is a good example of this model for the early historic phase. Here, the core of the empire was the state of Magadha, which encompassed in it various core such as Kalinga, Kosambi, and others to name a few. Then we will go to the geographic settings. Basically, the Eurasian continents is the largest landmass on the globe. Within the largest landmass, we are concerned with the relationship of two distinct geographical regions. The littoral states with access to the seas and wealth accumulated from trade and agriculture, and the inner continent of Eurasia, which was characterized by the pastoral land use pattern. Here in the littoral states resided the sedentary population, which enjoyed the fruits of agriculture and trade. The inner arc of the crescent of the Eurasian continent follows as Arctic Ocean coastline. The littoral states lie on the outer crescent of the Eurasian continent. The outer arc of the crescent stretches from the west to the east, includes in itself the Europe. Basically, it would be important to understand the major differences of the land use pattern that demarcates the hinterland from the littoral states. Four layers of plants crisscross the hinterland along the far north stretches tundra, its expanses hidden beneath the long winter nights. South of the tundra lies the taiga, the immense stretch of green coniferous forest that starts from the Baltic and to Pacific and the Pacific. The land is matted with the west of the conifer west and makes poor quality timber. The third belt, bright and green, lies further south of the taiga. This is the steppe, the sea of grass rooted in rich humus soil, increased in fertility through the centuries, partly by the decay of the grass itself, and also due to the minerals found in the rock bed below. If we will talk about the nomadic migrations, it was very important to discuss nomadic migrations because given the March rainfall of the area, the land use pattern has been pastoralism. However, there is one noticeable difference in the pastoralism practiced on the steppe and the other area. The steppe pastoralism was the mounted nomadic pastoralism. It was in essence a host culture. It was migratory in nature, always on the lookout for better pasture and better grasslands for the herds. Whatever the reasons for the migrations, perhaps by 19th century BC, but certainly between 1700 and 1500 BC, Hittites and Casites moved to Asia Minor. Aryans moved into India and Iran, and the Hurrians and Hyksos went to the Levant and Egypt. These and other migrations out to Central Asia affected not only each of the receiving regions and peoples. The consequences also altered the relations among these outlying peoples and regions themselves, as for instance, those between Mesopotamia and also Egypt. Another major migratory movement occurred around 1000 BC. From perhaps 1200 to 900 BC, Indo-Europeans moved eastward and perhaps became ancestors of the later Sassanians of the Tarim Basin and Xinjiangs among others like Phoenicians, Armenians and Dorians moved into the Levant and Greece. They contributed dramatic developments in Assyria, including Nineveh and Babylon, and later in Persia and also in Greece. Around the beginning of the Christian era, migratory movements emerging from Central Asia contributed to far-reaching changes, basically on China's inner Asian frontier. The Cha, Yin and Han rulers fought off the Wenshan, Hishuang, Nu in Jungaria across the Tianshan Mountains. The Chinese tried to enlist the aid of the Yuchi along the Kansu, the corridor, and Dunhuang. Basically, around 500 AD, new movements of peoples from Central Asia spread in all directions and had domino effects. We need to understand the two basic features of the Eurasian steppe that have decisively influenced the nomadic empires. These are the primarily separate habitat for the nomads and sedentary populations, and the relatively higher density of the nomadic populations within the hinterland and sometimes facilitate its unification. Thus, The sedentary population was on the rim of the hinterland and in the littoral states, basically while the nomads had the pastures of themselves. It was this clear-cut division born out of ecological factors, amongst other things, that facilitated a different cultural context to both the hinterland and the littoral states. The subjugation by the hinterland of the littoral states was then a necessity for the nomads to survive. Then, if we will talk about the chronology of the empires, then we have few things to discuss their chronology. Basically, from 900 to 500, 9000 to 5000 BC, the Neolithic Revolution expanded through the Southwest Asia and the Southern Europe, as well as into India and Northern China, producing settled farming and herding communities and a tremendous increase in population in these areas. By 4000 BC, however, another sort of revolution in human economy had begun taking place in the vast grassland areas of Central Eurasia. The steppes that stretch from southern Europe to North China in what might be termed the pastoral revolution. Basically, the early farming communities on the East European steppes domesticated the horse as their land becomes drier, the less suitable for farming. They came to rely almost exclusively on their herds of cattle, goats, and sheep. Over the next 1500 years, these people gradually abandoned sedentarism and developed a way of life involving nomadic migrations with their herds. After about 2400 BC, when the first nomadic invasion of Europe began, until the Mongols of the 13th and 14th centuries AD, the history of Europe and Asia was one of conflict between sedentary farmers and mobile, warlike steppe nomads. Three great peoples played the major role in Eurasian pastoral nomadism: Indo-Europeans, Turks, and Mongols. The following periods can be discerned in the alternative dominions of these three groups over the steppe lands. Basically, we will talk about the Indo-European period, which was time of 4000 BC to 300 AD. During this period, Indo-European tribes developed a mobile way of life, which allowed them to spread from the coast of the Black Sea in present-day Ukraine to what is today the western region of China. During this time, the political center of gravity flowed from the west to east, with the most powerful tribes such as the Iranian-speaking Scythians centered in Eastern Europe. However, some tribes such as Iranian-speaking Sakas and Alans brought pastoral nomadism to non-Indo-European groups in northern Central Asia, notably the ancestors of the Turks, Mongols, and the Tunguis, and the Manchu-speaking tribes of present-day northwestern China. By late Roman times, 4th century AD, the predominance movement of tribes on the steppes would be from Central and Northern Asia to China and westward to Europe and Iran. The High Sungunu, the period 250 BC to 450 AD. The Turkic-speaking tribes, some of the whom later went westward and became the Huns, who led by Attila, were the terror of Europe, probably led the first powerful steppe confederations in present-day Mongolia. Basically, the 155 AD, the northern Xiongnu were the destroyed, the replaced by the people of Mongol stock. Another Mongol speaking groups, the Zhuzhen whom the Chinese despairingly called the Zhuanzhun, a pun that means unpleasantly wrangling vermin. Replaced this the turn of 402 AD, while these Mongolian speaking tribes controlled Mongolia, much of northern China continued to be ruled by the Huisheng, No, and other Turkic speaking peoples. If you will talk about Turkic Khanate, the time is 552 to 744. In 552, the Mongol Juzhan was destroyed by the Turks who were thought to be the direct descendants to Hishwangnu, the Avars, a part of the defeated Mongols, moved westward and invaded Europe in the 7th century. At its height of Turkic Khanate, Kangan and Khan is the title of king among the Mongol and later among the Turkic tribes. Covered most of the Central Asia and northern China during the 6th and 7th centuries. The Turks developed an alphabet and inscribed part of their history on stone still. Basically, the Uyghur Empire, 744 to 840. Their cousins Uyghurs who displaced the Turks in 744 set up their own empire, basically centered in present-day Mongolia. The Uyghur adopt Manichaeism, a religion originating in Persia from a mixture of Iranian Zoroastrianism and Christianity, and developed a vertical script based on an alphabet used in Persia, the old Sogdian script. If we will talk about steppe kingdoms in North China, the time of 840 to 1278 AD, as the Kong dynasty moved towards collapse, a number of steppe peoples rose to dominate in northern China. They included the Mongol, Khaitan, the Tibetan, basically Tanguts and Georgians, and sectors of the Manchu, meanwhile on the steppes and forest Mongolia. The last thing, if you will discuss the Mongol World Empire, the time 1206 to 1368, the Genghis Khan united the Mongol and neighboring Turkey tribes by 1206. The Uyghurs who submitted peacefully provided their vertical script as the first Mongol writing system, and the Mongol Tatar. The Tatar were a Mongol group absorbed by the Genghis Khan's Mongols, but the name was transferred to the many Turkic peoples who served as Mongol allies. Armies conquered all of the steppes as well as the sedentary civilization of Russia, Persia, and Mesopotamia and southern China. Mongol domination in Islamic Southwest Asia lasted until 1355, in China until 1368, and Russia well into the 15th century AD. Then political decline of the steppe peoples 14th century to present. Basically, as Mongol rule was overthrown and sedentary peoples, especially the Russians and Chinese, rebuilt their political power and gradually encroached on the peoples of the steppes. If we will talk about the understanding the empires, the last things, understanding the empires, basically we will talk about the central thesis of Anatoly Khazanov, 1979 nomads, and the outside world is that nomads would never exist on their own without the outside world and the non-nomadic societies. This chapter has few things. The important thing is powerful nomadic empires rose and fell in tandem with native dynasties in China. The Han, Hishunu empires appeared within the decade of one another, while the empire of the Turks emerged just as China reunified under the Sui Tang dynasties. The unification of China under the Han dynasty and the steppe under the Hishunu after centuries anarchy occurred within the single generations. Basically, the nomadism, as we have noted, is a system that must interact with other economics, pastoral productions, is capable of creating great individual wealth, but it cannot generate the great quantity and variety of foodstuffs that sedentary society does. It is also something that
I
is
do that through ODI.
the nomads with his highly developed
Prompts.
equestrian skills was a redoubtable and fair warrior. Conflict with sedentary society came largely over access to the gods of agrarian and urban production. Nomads traded or aided for those goods, adopting whichever strategy suited their capabilities of the moment. Powerful empires like China, whose posture towards the nomads was usually defensive, often used the prospect of trade as a means of control. Such contact and conflict could provide the impetus for nomadic state buildings. Successful raiding was also means by which nomadic chieftain was able to strengthen his position, providing booty to be distributed to his followers and enhancing this charisma as warlord and diplomat. And the formation of nomadic states is still not fully understood. Basically, largely because we have few documents coming from within the nomadic world that describe the goals of the state builders, given their tribal organization and continual training for war and executive talents needed to move herds people some distance. Moreover, sedentary states responding a nomadic pressure or adopting an aggressive posture towards the state might also serve as the catalyst. These
Yeah.
nomads continuously tested the military defenses of their neighbors. Momentary weakness or decline could result in their conquest of a sedentary state. This, however, could have far reaching and often unwanted repercussions in nomadic society. Basically, the first of these was usually the salutations of the ruling clan, now a royal dynasty, and elements of the nomadic elite as they adopted the trapping and culture of the newly conquered subjects. They became alienated from those of their fellow tribesmen who remained in the steppe. The rank and file nomads did not share in their benefits. So, the transformation of their chieftains into heaven ordained rules held little appeal for them. It was the nomadic elite and skilled sedentary groups that had joined them that gained from state information, state formations. Statehood tended to further social and economic differentiation on all levels. Nomadic egalitarianism in ideal not only reality in any event but was now even more distant. It is interesting to note that the nomadic charismatic ruling clans, the great imperial lines of which were extraordinarily long lived, even when transformed into territorial rulers of largely sedentary societies, the whole failed to resolve the question of orderly succession. So, The Huns and the Empire, the last chapter of this block, of this unit, basically the Huns and the Empire. As one story goes, mountain herdsmen within the hinterland followed a heifer cow, crossed over the shallow waters of the strait, stretched between the Black Sea and the Sea of Azov. These settlements were the Ostrogoths and the nomads were the Huns. Basically, by this time, the Huns has consolidated their hold of the forward grazing base of Hungary and had established their center between the Thesis and Danube. The Huns gradually expanded their rule largely through vassal king over the vast area of northern Europe, stretching from the Rhine to the Baltic and the Russian forest. A raid across Caucasus and the mounted a search for food. The Roman world, coping with the chain migrations that the Huns had set up, did not see the horse archer for a while. All that was to change in a few Timolus's year. And the last thing is the Huns retreated back to their forward grazing bases, leaving behind them a bleeding Western Empire in Europe. From the Huns, the mantle of the foremost steep power, the hinterland, was being passed on to the Turks. Then the Mongol empires. The last part, the Mongol empires. The vast empire that the Mongols built in the 13th century AD. One may see the Mongol Empire as the gigantic political force, bringing almost the entire continent of Asia under the control of one great Khan. The empire created a huge economically boom and a great exchange of culture and knowledge throughout the entire world. As a result of the Mongols, the Silk Road responded, and the route from Europe to Asia was no longer thought to be impossible. A great deal of knowledge reached Europe, including art, science, and gunpowder, which greatly contributed in bringing Western Europe out of dark age. Likewise, in Asia, we saw an exchange of ideas between Persia and China. China was once again united under a single ruler. Russia was separated from the rest of Europe, but was no longer a disunited feudalistic society. The Mongols ended the short-lived Khazarian Empire, brought the fall of the Abbasid Khalifa, and dealt a great blow Islamic culture. Although the Mongols did indeed bring a huge list of deaths and destructions, the economically boom that followed, obviously something not to be overlooked. So one of the only one that clearly did not benefit from Mongol conquest was Poland and Hungary. That was because of the Mongols withdrew and did not set up a revitalizing government. One major factor that comes through the analysis, the nomadic world and the empires, it built in the inherent weakness of the nomad economy. This economy demanded a constant flow of resources from the sedentary world. The failure to garner that flow resource meant a tremendous setback to the economy. So it was this inherent weakness combined with the cavalry that led to the massive thrust in all the directions in the littoral states and became the foundation of the nomad polity. In this way, the empires that the nomads built were therefore short-lived. So they, however, made a lasting impact on the littoral state that reigned the hinterland. So we have already finished these three units of this block: the Latin America, then Africa, and the nomadic empires. So this is the time for the conversation between the students and I myself. So if you have any questions, so ask. then we will try to sort out the answer, the problems. Do you have any question from these units? The Latin America, Africa, and nomadic empires. Hello? Hello? Hello?
Dear student friends, if you have any doubt, you can
Hello?
ask question. Hello,
Hello?
am I audible?
Hello?
Yes, sir. Yes, sir.
Am I audible?
Yes, hello.
Okay. If you have any question, you can ask now.
Hello?
No, sir.
Okay. So anybody
Yes, yes. Say loudly your question.
anybody has a doubt or anything you can discuss with the resource person. He is very much online and
Hello?
it should be as per because it should be interactive. It should not be one-sided. Or the learner should ask question, or should if the learner has any queries or any doubts, he can ask question to the resource person.
हेलो
Yes,
Hello?
yes, yes.
हेलो हाँ सर नोमैडिक एम्पायर गोटे टर्म थिले डोमिनो इफेक्ट काइंडली एलाबोरेट करिवे डोमिनो
कोटा
इफेक्ट
कोटा को क्वेश्चन टा नोमैडिक
सर डोमिनो इफेक्ट नोमैडिक एम्पायर्स जेबे पढौथिले गोटे डोमिनो इफेक्ट गोटे अछि गोटे टर्म जेते बेले आपण पढिले नोमैडिक माइग्रेशन विषय रे सेबे ही सेटा थिला डोमिनो इफेक्ट आज्ञा
domino
Actually,
effects.
yes, yes.
Yes. Domino effects, that's a that's a term which was used there during the time of nomadic migrations, and that's the exactly.
Actually, let me explain.
Sir, yes.
Domino effects means nomadic imperialism is a term derived from nomadism. Actually, nomadic people, their main character is to migrate from one place to another in search of food and shelter. Because these people, nomadic imperialism, it starts from, instead of they collected, no doubt, in search of food and shelter, they migrated from one to place. At the same time, they looted the wealth and resources of that area. You know, not only they plundered.
Yes, sir.
Many examples are there in the recent past, in the medieval society and in the medieval period, when Genghis Khan also invaded many times to India. So the reason is that their main character is that they believe that through incursion or through aggression they can plunder. Their purpose is not to capture the land. Their purpose is to plunder the wealth of that area and to bring it back to their own empire for building their own economy. That's the main purpose. That is called domino theory, domino effect. It means, suppose, for example, some Chinese emperor or the you can say those emperor or those who came from outside plunder the wealth of India. When they left, what was the impact? What was the impact? Yes. Many examples are there because it's a political. You can say when they plundered or when they exploited the wealth of the conquered state. So when they left, so definitely there some kind of effect. That effect may be political effect, maybe economic effect, maybe religious effect. You know. So, because when you will be ruled, when you will be aggressed, conquered by another outside country, but they came and conquered and left, you cannot say that they only conquered, they only plunder our wealth. But at the same time, there was also some kind of effect of that country on your culture, or impact of that conquered state, impact of that conqueror state on your culture. Clear now? So this is called domino theory. If you go inside, for example, taking the example of Genghis Khan, taking the example Chinese aggression, many Chinese, or you can say many Mongol, from Mongol, the Mongols, they came and they conquered India. You know, they left, of course, they left India. But we should not forget that there was no interaction, there was no cultural impact on India. The Mongols, of course, they came and conquered, invaded. But at the same time, they accepted the cultural facts, characteristics of India to their own country. At the same time, they imprinted some ideas on some imprinted the cultural nuances of their country on India. So this is a two-way theory, or this is called domino theory, dominion character. Because when you will be ruled, when you will be ruled by a country, you cannot say that there is no impact. You know. So any more question?
Hello.
Yes, sir. I want to
Yes,
ask a
yes,
question.
Hello.
yes.
What was the role of food surplus in the development of the Maya civilization? What was the role of a food surplus in the development of the Maya civilization?
No. You see, your sound is breaking. Maya civilization, I understand, but what other one?
Sir, what was the role of food surplus in the
Hello.
development of the Maya civilization?
Wait. I'm not able to listen.
Okay, sir. Actually, he is asking what was the role of Maya civilization?
Food surplus.
Higher civilization.
What was the role of a food surplus in the development of the Maya civilization?
Food surplus. Okay.
Yes, sir.
Let me explain. Food surplus. Food surplus.
Yes, sir.
Maya civilization is yes. I'll just explain. Let him because he's getting tired. Let me explain. Maya civilization is a highly, as he mentioned, is a pastoral economy. Maya civilization is a pastoral economy, and this economy based on agriculture. It may be traditional agriculture, it may be modernized agriculture, but it's a pastoral economy. So pastoral economy is highly dependent on domestication of animals. When there was a surplus production, what will happen to your economy? Tell me. When there will be surplus production in your economy, suppose you have produced, suppose 10 quintals of rice, but your capacity is to
Yes.
consume only 5 quintals of rice. That 5 quintals
Yes.
of rice, that will increase your economy, or that will boost your economy. You know, and you may export it to
Yes, sir. Yes, sir.
states, you may export to your provincial states, or you may export to your neighboring countries. So this happened to the Maya civilization because as they are they maintaining the pastoral economy, they produced a high quantity of agricultural products which they could not consume. So the surplus production was there, and that surplus production helped in the exploration or expansion of trade and commerce with the neighboring states or neighboring civilizations. That is found particularly in Maya civilization. That is for surplus production. Any more questions?
Hello.
Hello.
Sir, I have a question.
Hello.
Hello?
Yeah, question. Yes.
Hello.
Hello.
Yes, you are audible. Don't worry. You ask question. You are audible.
My question is discuss about society, economy, and polity of West Africa.
Okay. That is
West
a big
Africa.
question. You are talking
Yes.
social, economy, and political aspects of West Africa. That would take one period. So, I request Vishwa sir, please, in short, to just focus on society, economy, polity. Polity survived or existed in West Africa.
Yes, sir.
Yes, sir.
In short, because it cannot be discussed in detail.
हाँ
In
ये
short.
सर शॉर्ट में डिस्कस
Yeah,
करते
yeah,
हैं.
yeah.
Mhm.
Only point. You see, in the exam also, there is no need to elaborate it. You write the point, and this it can be discussed within 5 to 10 sentences, not more than that.
Yes,
Yes,
yes.
yes. You,
Basically, their society, economy, and political things of West Africa. Basically, we may say that uh, their kingdom is agricultural production. Okay, if you will talk about the economy, their agricultural production, which was not only sufficient to feed the entire kingdom, but also held the consolidation of the kingdom. Because the
Yes.
Ghana kingdom there, yet the Ghana kingdom derides a economy power, imposing tax to the Saran trade. And of
Yes.
course, the traditional village chiefs, traditional village chiefs and some of the clans together constitute their provinces. Okay, and their peoples basically producer of the empire, and they were engaged in agriculture, animal rearing, fishing, mining, and worked as a craftsman for the non-agricultural production. And if
Yes
you will
sir.
talk about their towns, they are quite populated. As I told you, that the towns were quite populated. Houses, not only nobles, the aristocrats, they are, took care of the government, their army, priesthood, and craftsmen also. Various smiths were living in towns, which were cheaply trade centers called. Okay, and the traders were mostly foreigners. Basically, they are traders, mostly foreigners, and they gave a composition character to the towns. And their slaves, they are also slaves captured during the war, and by other means were labor reserves. These things are there because their society is a well systematically society. Economy is basically depends, their pastoral economy, it was also very good, and polity was very disciplined. So overall we can say the society, economy, and polity of the West Africa, it's good, not for the bad, for the people. Okay,
Yes sir.
okay, any question more?
Sir, sir, I want to ask another question.
Yes.
Sir, I ask another question. Sir, I
Yes,
want to
tell.
ask, what are the key features? What are the key features of classic Maya civilization?
Classic.
What are the key features? What are the key features of Maya civilization?
Yes.
Key features.
Key features of Maya civilization, na? Okay.
Yes, sir. Yes, sir.
They are basically the Maya feature. They are settlement. Okay, they are settlement. They are architecture. Oh, okay. They are political things. They are systematically society. These are the key features of the Maya civilization. Basically, they are thinking. Okay, and their settlement, their architecture. As I told you, their architecture. Okay, these are the key features, and of course we can say their architectural facets. Okay, and their city of course represents very good general character of the Maya civilization. Hmm. And it is also evidence that high priest, buried in the plaza. These are the main thing. Okay, and of course their monumental buildings were also constructed
Hmm.
during the time of the civilization. And of course we can say the roadways. Okay, roadways, their administrative
Yes, sir.
functions. These are the key features of the Maya's
Mhm.
civilization. Okay.
So, thank you.
Any questions from anyone? Hello.
Sir, I want to ask another question.
Yes.
Sir, what are the reasons? What are the reasons for the collapse of Maya civilization?
What are the?
What are the reasons? What are the reasons for collapse of Maya civilization?
Yes. What are the reasons for the collapse of the Maya civilization? few regions are there which
Yes,
are
sir.
very important to discussion. Some, according to some scholars, historians, they are telling severe droughts. Okay, severe droughts, and epidemics such as malaria, yellow fever. It might have been the social consequences. Their calamity, earthquake. These are the main things, and invasion of Mexicans. Okay, peasant uprising, agricultural
Yeah.
collapse. These are the main
Hmm.
points behind the collapse of Maya civilization. Okay.
Okay, okay. Thank you, sir.
Any question? Hello.
If there
Hello.
is no question, you can continue, sir.
Yes, yes. Hello.
Because
Yes, sir.
yes, if there is no question, you can go ahead, sir.
Sir,
Go ahead.
actually, I will start tomorrow, sir, because I have not finished some materials.
Okay, okay.
So it is better to discuss today. If there is any clarification, if there is any doubts, then we will discuss. Then I will
Okay.
continue for tomorrow for 2 units, 2 blocks. Block 5 and block 6 we will finish tomorrow, sir.
Please let us discuss in detail.
Okay, yes, yes, yes. So Maya civilization, by Maya civilization. So Maya,
Yes, sir.
Inca, Aztec, Maya, Inca, these are the very important civilization of early Americans. Okay, and then another thing I have to say, that is the Incas organization of polity. That is very
Yes.
important. Yes, that is very important organization, economic life. Okay, here one question is there. Mm, yes, how did the Incas preserve their food? Okay, this question maybe it will come for short question. Then, yes, what in your opinion was a remarkable feature of the Maya settlement? Okay, these two questions I think it is important. Then write a short note of the Aztec civilization. It is also an important question. If we will go to Africa, then North Africa, West Africa, and South Africa. The three zones are here. Basically, here the question, the nature of kingship and government in Egypt. This question is very important. Question number third. Okay, and the fourth question also important. The briefly discuss about the economy of the region in South Africa. Okay,
Hmm.
economy of the South Africa.
Sir, repeat the second question, please.
Yes, tell me.
Repeat the second question, please. Nature of kingship, second one.
Yes, yes, that question, nature of kingship. Uh, uh, yes, nature of kingship and government in Egypt. Okay, give a brief account of the nature of kingship and government in Egypt. This question, and another question is, discuss in brief the economy of the region of South Africa. Okay, these two questions I think very important. There is a short question about the bride wealth. The bride wealth. What was bride wealth and how did it control social relations? Okay, bride wealth. Let me speak something about the bride wealth. Was a unique institution in the South African Bantu
Particularly,
speaking
yes, yes.
society. Bantu speaking society. A
Bantu, yes.
woman moved from her parental house to that of her in-laws after marriage. She was supposed to shoulder that responsibility of agricultural production, food preparation, upkeep of the house, and giving birth and rearing of children. So bride wealth. Okay, this question also important. The last unit of this block, you will see some question about, yes, the chronology of empires. Chronology of empires and the how the nomadic migrations happened. Okay, This question also important, and you will see the question, the first chapter, the Latin America. Basically, Latin America, you know what? What is Latin America?
Sir, my question is the nature of Inca political organization.
The nature of?
What is the nature of Inca political organization?
Nature of interpersonal.
It's political.
From which unit? You are talking about which unit?
इनका जो आप अभी
अच्छा, इनका, हाँ,
Inca
हाँ,
tribe.
हाँ,
Yes, yes.
yes. Okay. Tell me again your question.
what is the nature of Inca political organization?
Nature of
Okay.
Inca political organization.
Organization, yes. Basically, the nature of Inca political organization, we can say that basically their administrative, their system of administrative headquarters of Inca is very strong, and their basically we can say their moments of sun, their palace observations, okay, and their polity is very strong. Organization of the politics depends on organization, and the organization was controlled by the elite peoples, okay, the kings, and of course basically the expansion was there. It was achieved by the lords. Local lords were fitted into a systems. So the organization of polity basically in this civilization is good, and it was very well systematically happened, okay. And we can say the local lords were there. They can provided labor services as well as military services to the Incas. Their royal functionaries were placed along the roads. Basically, the administrative centers used to inspect and oversee subject provincial lords and their territories. Okay, so it may have included working as court as well, as court. If there is any problem, so it will go to the court then for the sort out of the every problems. Okay.
Sir, I want to ask another question.
Ask.
Sir, could you explain the Incas preserve their food?
Acha. Preserve the
How did the Incas preserve their food?
food, na?
Yes, sir.
How they preserve food.
Yes.
Yes.
Basically, the economical surplus were there, so they preserve their food very systematically. Okay, because the agriculture techniques, the cultivation, crop rotation, and irrigation were very good. So they preserved their crops into very systematically way. So in the time of need, they will use these crops for their use. So they will settle, they will kept their crops very systematically, and they preserved in a safety place where they can keep that all the items for the long time. Okay.
Actually,
So they can use
let
this
me
crop
explain.
in that area.
Let me explain. For example, in Harappan civilization, people they had also surplus production. So this surplus production was kept in storage house. This is called granary. So same thing happened in whether it is Inca or whether it is other civilization of the world. You'll find they kept in a storage, or they kept in a such a place where there was no chance of destruction. You know,
Yes.
so that it can be kept in a safety position, and it can be utilized at any time when the people needed it. When there was a need of food, they can be, it could be utilized by the government or by the people. So generally, what happened? They follow different kind of techniques in preserving the food, so that the food or the crops cannot be destroyed easily. Clear?
Yes, yes.
So that
Okay.
technique, the Incas, they were, or the Maya people, they were knowing very well how to preserve the surplus production so that it cannot be destroyed by by insects or by insects or other you can say other destructive you can say destructive insects. In this way, the different civilizations, even if Harappan's people also they are knowing how to preserve it, and this is also an example. This is also discovered by through excavations. It came to our notice that how people are preserving the surplus agricultural production in a storage house called granary, and how the granary system well constructed with bond bricks, how it was well protected by guards, and people were guarding it, protecting it, as and how it was used during a natural calamity or during the time of scarcity. It also it was also similar way the preservation of surplus food also kept in a storage, and or
Okay.
in other words it can, or you can say, we can say almost all the civilizations had similarity in preserving the crops for future purpose. Is it
Okay.
clear?
Yes, sir.
Yes. Any more question?
Sir, could you explain the economy system of South Africa?
Okay.
Economy?
Yes,
Economy
yes,
of South Africa.
Yes,
The
yes.
you see, in tribal in South Africa, purely, let me explain. When you explain the economy of South Africa, first you have to explain what type of society it was there. It was a
Yes, sir.
pastoral society, tribal society, and two system it was going on smoothly, basically agriculture and domestication of animals. Because when you talk about agriculture, we have to supplement it with the domestication of animals. Without supporting with the support of domestication of animals, thus agriculture cannot survive. Clear now? So
Yes,
substantially agriculture was supplemented by domestication of animals. These are the two main important occupations followed by the people in their society, and
Yes.
which generally persisted or subsisted by the people in enhancing their economy. Agriculture, those who followed agriculture, or at the same time they also domesticated reared animals, because these animals were also helpful for cultivating the lands. So
Yes.
without, because there was no modern there was no modern taking as in the present days. So we cannot, this is a completely a tribal society. Traditional economy was there. This traditional economy or pastoral economy based upon agriculture, domestication of animals, and of course there was a trade and commerce. This trade and commerce, it was, or you can say it was not that much, you can say it is not that much emphasized or that much given importance, because as agriculture and domestication was much importance, because these are the tribal baseline of tribal economy. Any more question?
Hello.
Any more question, please?
Hello.
Hello?
Yes, yes.
Sir, economic life of Inca.
Decline of Incas.
No, sir, economic life of Incas.
Oh, economic life of Incas. Okay,
Yes, sir.
okay. So, hello.
Yes,
Hello?
Actually, the student is asking about the economy of Incas. Economic
Yes,
life
yes,
of
yes.
Incas.
The economic life of
You
Incas.
just, sir, it is just you. You just give the points. Points. Economy
yes, yes, sir.
means agriculture. The economy
Yes.
is trade and commerce. That means metallurgy or artisan, or you can say their craftsmanship. These are the important points you just focus upon.
Yes, 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 sir. Basically, they were doing the agriculture production, agriculture techniques. They used very good agriculture techniques, including good cultivation, crop rotation, and irrigation facility was very good there. Okay, so their salt, fish, and edible large were available in the coastal area. So their economical life was good, and they because on their agriculture practices, which were quite labor intensive. Okay, because of labor intensive, because of good agricultural practices, their economic life is more stable than the other civilization. Okay.
Okay.
Yes, sir.
Let me add something. In the agriculture, you'll see Inca's economy is a pastoral economy or agricultural based economy. So this agricultural based economy, it is generally number one, it is a labor intensive. Labor intensive means what? Now more labor was employed in agriculture. This is a labor intensive. Number two, they had surplus production. Whatever they consumed, after its consumption, whatever the surplus production they had, they kept it in a preservative way. They kept in a preservative way, or they followed the preservative way, and they preserve it in the storage for future purpose, because there was a scope, there was a chance of a drought, there was a chance of less production, there was a chance of you can say different kind of difficulties they might have. So that in order to prevent those problems, so they kept in a preservative, or you can say they kept in a storage. Number two. Number three is that whatever the traditional agricultural practice they followed, it was completely high intensive, and it helped them to boost their economy. You can say that no doubt it was supplemented by the domestication of animals, or the animals they used it in cultivating their lands. At the same time, they were also they used their different type of techniques, different types of techniques. For example, in our traditional tribal society, we are following dune cultivation, we are following terrace cultivation, we are following shifting cultivation. So these are techniques also followed. Similar techniques were also followed by the people of Incas in order to increase the fertility of the land, so that the production of the agriculture will enhance their economy. So you can write highlighting those points. Number one, the agriculture or the agricultural land was highly fertile, and it was labor intensive. And the agriculturists, they followed traditional ways. They followed different techniques to preserve agricultural production. So this way, you can write those points. At the same time, you can highlight that during those days, that even if the Incas, they were agriculturists, at the same time, they were the cattle rearer, and they also kept cattle for agricultural agricultural use, and they use the cattle in the agricultural production. So you can also highlight those points. Okay.
Okay, sir.
Then,
Sir, I want to ask another question. Hello.
yes.
I want to ask another question. The bride wealth of South African. The bride wealth of South African.
You see, I'll nicely give example. I'll give one example of this particularly in Mizoram. In our societies in northeastern India, you'll find these are completely tribal states. In tribal states, I'll give you example of Nagas. I'll give examples of Mijos. What they did, they had a marital of when the marriage was organized, and the bride, when the bride came to the house of the bridegroom, that time the bride family, they gifted some wealth. You know, gifted some wealth like cattle, agricultural lands, you know, wooden furniture, so other ornaments which can be used by the bride in the bridegroom house. Clear now? So that was a gift.
Yes, sir.
The thing, it was a gift given by the bride families or the relatives during the marriage time. For example, you'll find in our present days, when a marriage is occurred, when the marriage is organized, so different families or the relatives were invited, and they were offering different kind of gifts to the bride. So this bride, when it taken to the these gifts, whatever gifts were given to the bride, when it taken to the house of the bridegroom, it was called a bride gift. You know, because it was the wealth of the bride. So this wealth, it was a belief, you know, it's a tribal belief. This wealth can help the bride during the time of crisis or during the time of problems or issues faced by the bride in future. So in order to avoid economic crisis of the bride, so this bride gift can be utilized to solve her problem. Clear now? So this
Yes, sir.
also very much there in each and every tribal family or tribal society. In our tribal society also this practice is there. In Mizo tribal family also, tribal society, this practice is very much there. In Naga tribal society, this practice is very much there. So it is very much tagged or is very much you can say very much added to our society, because bridal gift is nothing, bridal wealth is nothing. It is a kind of gifts given by the relatives of the family of the bride for the use of the bride in future, because they were thinking that in future my I can say my daughter may face problem, economic problem. So in order to avoid this economic problem, so this gift was given to the bride. This is called bride wealth. And this
Yes, sir.
bride wealth was in the form of cattle. Remember, cattle, ornaments, and in the form of land, piece of land, and in the form of wooden furniture. Clear now?
Yes.
And this could be utilized by the bride during the crisis time. Clear now?
Yes, sir.
Yes. Any more question?
सर आपण जोटा ब्राइड वेल्थ टा एलाबोरेट कले से बुक रे इट हैज बीन मेंशन्ड दैट माने हस्बैंड जोटा ब्राइड को दउथिला वेल्थ ऑफ कर रे माने सेटा ब्राइड वेल्थ थोड़ी सो सेटा के कंफ्यूजन हे गला सती पे
नहीं बहिरे कोन लिखा है को मते
सर बुक रे लिखा है द हस्बैंड गेव हर ब्राइड वेल्थ टू द फैमिली ऑफ हिज वाइफ माने सी माने जेहेतु सी सब रिस्पांसिबिलिटी नउथिला तांको घरे तो हस्बैंड ब्राइड को जोटा दउथिला सेटा ब्राइड वेल्थ बोली बुक रे मेंशन करा है
ब्राइड वेल्थ ताले
यस सर
ठीक अछि डिफरेंट सोसाइटीज इन जनरल आई जस्ट एक्सप्लेन, but in which society you talking about, which society? Inca society?
Sir, yes sir, no sir, Bantu speaking society, South Africa.
Who society विषय कहउछनी को particularly because I am
South
taking a
Africa
general concept.
okay sir, एटा जोटा लिखा है सेटा लिखा है साउथ अफ्रीका रे Bantu speaking society ऊपर
बस it is a general concept.
Yes, yes.
If you see different society, I'm talking, I'll just give you an example. There are some societies following the matriarchal society, some societies following the patriarchal society. So it depends on them. If a girl, if a bride is coming to the house of the bride, it is called and living with the wife, it is called a matriarchal society. And patriarchal society, when a society, family is dominated by father, it is a patriarchal society. But when a family is dominated by or mother, it is called matriarchal society. But in some society in India, in tribal society of India, when there is a matriarchal society, and definitely, so where is the question? Bride does not arise. Bride will be different. It will be from the bridegroom side. You know, so that is why I just am giving you one example that how the bride's wealth was collected. In generally, what happens? There are two tribal families are there. Lineal system is there. One is matriarchal, another is patrilineal. And patrilineal means where the father is when a family is dominated by father, when family is dominated by or managed by father, or the decision is maintained in particularly in a family, that is called patriarchal society. Patriarchal society, the family is dominated by the decision of the mother. It is a material. Then there was the house of the bride and stays with the bride, and it is called and comes under the umbrella of mother, and the mother dominates the family. It is called matrilineal society. So in that matrilineal society, bride wealth is coming from the husband side. Husband side, because she stays with the family and only husband comes to her. So in that case, that Western Africa also, in West Africa, generally this practice also follow. That is called matrilineal society. So it is a sociological part, but question if you what is in the book, it is written, you follow it. Clear now?
Yes, yes.
Okay, sir.
Any more? But general concept is that, right? If you sociology book, if you follow this bride well, it is written like this. But it is in because as there are two types of families, what matrilineal, patrilineal. So that is why I am giving two examples. Any question?
Sir, my question is from last class.
Last class are already left, so tomorrow you ask. Okay.
Okay, sir.
Then
Okay, sir.
any more? You just explain what is the problem.
Sir, what is the pattern of nomadic migration?
The nomadic pattern of nomadic migration.
Yes, sir. From Unit 10.
I'll just inform you. Nomadic migration. You will explain tomorrow. Okay.
Okay, sir. Okay, sir.
Okay. Thank you very